I grew up in a small town tucked between stretches of pine forest and forgotten railroad tracks, a place where time seemed to stall sometime in the 1980s and never bothered catching up. My high school was old, brick walls stained by decades of rain, cracked pavement in the parking lot, and football bleachers that creaked even when empty. We didn't have much going on. The kind of town where people still leave their doors unlocked and everyone shows up to the Friday night football game even if the team's been losing for years. My graduating class had maybe 120 kids in it, tops. You knew everyone, not just by name, but by the sound of their laughter, the way they walked, the cars their parents drove. There wasn't much room for secrets here. Or so I thought. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't invisible either. I played a little soccer, worked part-time at a grocery store, and mostly kept to myself. People weren't mean, just disconnected. Small towns have this weird way of making you feel both seen and ignored all at once. We didn't really have bullies in the classic sense. No one was getting shoved into lockers or stuffed into trash cans. But there was a kind of quiet meanness that floated around like smoke, jokes that stayed just under the radar, looks that lasted too long, silence that said more than words ever could. Back then, I thought the scariest thing about my school was the weird basement beneath the gym, locked behind an old steel door nobody had a key to. Turns out I was wrong. What really started it all was a kid named Evan. He transferred into our school halfway through sophomore year, and from day one, he didn't quite fit. But I'll get to that. Evan showed up the second week of October, just as the leaves were really starting to turn. He had this pale, blotchy complexion like he hadn't seen sunlight in a while, and hair so black it looked wet. He was tall, taller than most of the guys in our grade, and he moved slowly, deliberately, like every step he took was calculated. They put him in a few of my classes, including third period American history, where he sat 2 desks behind me. He never said a word. No hi, no what's up, not even when the teacher called on him. He just stared. Not like a glare, not exactly. Just watched. His eyes were a weird shade, gray, but with this sort of watery sheen, like he was always about to cry but never did. By Halloween, people had already started whispering things. That he was homeschooled before and didn't know how to act around people. That he lived with his grandmother because his parents were gone. Someone claimed they saw him sitting in the cemetery across from the church after school, just staring at the gravestones. I wasn't really part of the rumor crowd, but I heard things. And honestly, it wasn't just gossip. There was something off about Evan. Like how no one ever saw him eat. He'd go to the cafeteria, sit down at an empty table, and just stare ahead until the bell rang. Then there were the drawings. One day in history class, I forgot my pencil and turned to ask the kid behind me, Evan, if I could borrow one. He didn't say anything, but slid a mechanical pencil across my desk. As I reached for it, I saw the sketchbook open in front of him. He was drawing a house. My house. It was unmistakable, the cracked driveway, the dented mailbox, the dead tree in our front yard. I froze. He saw me looking and shut the book quickly without a word. That night, I barely slept. My bedroom window faced the street, and every car that passed made me jump. The worst part? When I looked out the next morning, I noticed something I hadn't before. The dent in our mailbox, it looked fresh. Like it hadn't been there the day before. A week passed after the drawing incident, and I didn't say a word to Evan. I still caught him looking at me sometimes in class, but he never spoke. He didn't even seem curious, just observant, like he was studying something that didn't quite make sense to him. Then came the Thursday afternoon. It started to snow, early for November, even for upstate New York. History let out, and I was heading toward the front doors when I noticed Evan standing by the lockers, staring out the window at the falling flakes. For reasons I still don't fully understand, I walked over. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe I was just tired of pretending he wasn't there. Pretty early for snow, huh? I said. He didn't look at me at first. Just kept his eyes on the window. Then finally, slowly, he turned. Do you walk home? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes, I said. Why? He paused. Can I walk with you? I hesitated. Every rational part of me screamed no. But instead I shrugged and said, sure. We didn't talk for the first few minutes. Just walked in silence as snow collected in the grooves of our shoes. I kept waiting for him to say something, to explain the drawing, or his silence in class, or even just make small talk. But all he said, just as we reached the wooded shortcut near Mill Creek, was this. Do you ever hear footsteps behind you when you're alone? I stopped walking. What? He turned to look at me, not nervous, not joking. Completely serious. I hear them. Even when there's no one there. Sometimes at night. Sometimes in the woods. I tried to laugh, tried to brush it off. You mean like an echo? He didn't laugh. No. Not an echo. It's heavier. Like something's following. But it never wants to be seen. He stared into the woods beside us like he expected something to emerge. It's always 3 steps behind, he said. Always 3. Something about the way he said it, it didn't feel like a ghost story. It felt like a fact. A report. A warning. We finished the walk in silence. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. I was thirsty, so I got up for a glass of water. As I stood at the kitchen sink, I glanced out into the backyard. There were footprints in the snow. One set, leading up to my bedroom window, and none leading away. The next morning, the footprints were gone, covered by fresh snow. I tried to tell myself it was a dream, or maybe just tracks from the mailman or a stray dog. But they were human-sized. Barefoot. I didn't talk to Evan that day, and he didn't talk to me either. In fact, he wasn't in school at all. His seat behind me in history class stayed empty. Nobody seemed to notice or care. It was during 6th period, around 1:10 p.m., when the intercom crackled overhead with the principal's voice. Attention. This is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Teachers, lock your doors and turn off the lights. Students, remain silent and follow instructions. My math teacher went pale. She rushed to the door, turned the lock, flicked off the lights, and told everyone to get to the corner of the room, away from the windows. The room filled with the kind of silence that has its own sound. No whispers. No snickers. Just breathing and the soft creak of students shifting nervously on the carpet. Minutes passed. 10. 20. 30. No one came. No more announcements. I kept staring at the door. I don't know why, but I felt watched. Not from the window. From inside the room. Then someone whispered. Not a student. A whisper that came from under one of the desks in the far corner, so soft I thought I imagined it. 3 steps. I held my breath. Looked around. No one else reacted. 3 steps behind, it said again. This time, I felt it, warm breath on the back of my neck. I spun around. No one. Just Maddie Thompson, eyes wide, mouthing, "What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My ears were ringing. Eventually, the lockdown ended without explanation. The principal came back on the intercom with a short statement. "Thank you for your cooperation. The situation is under control. Students may be dismissed at the regular time." That was it. But something wasn't under control. I knew it. I could feel it. Especially when I got to my locker at the end of the day. There, taped to the inside of the locker door, was a page torn from a sketchbook. A drawing. It was me, sleeping in bed. Something standing behind the curtain, watching. That night, I couldn't sleep. I left my bedroom light on. I checked the locks twice. My curtain stayed closed. Every time the house creaked, I jolted upright, heart pounding in my throat. Around 2:43 a.m., I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. At the window. Not knocking. Not scratching. A tap, like a single finger pressed rhythmically against the glass. I froze. Didn't breathe. Prayed I was dreaming. No dream. I slid out of bed slowly and crept to the window. The curtains were thin, just enough to see a silhouette. Someone, or something, was on the other side. Motionless. Tall. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. I must have stood there for a full minute, heart hammering so loud I was sure it would wake the house. Then, finally, a voice. "It's Evan." But it didn't sound quite like him. It was flat. Hollow. Like the words were being repeated by something that didn't understand them. I hesitated, then cracked the window just slightly. "What do you want?" I whispered. He stepped forward just enough for the moonlight to catch his face. It was Evan, but wrong. His skin was stretched. His eyes had no color, just a dull, milky gray. And his mouth didn't move when he spoke. "You saw it." My blood went cold. I backed away from the window. "What?" I whispered. He didn't blink. Didn't breathe. "It saw you too." That's when the smile came. Too wide. Too still. Like it had been painted on. I slammed the window shut, pulled the curtains tight, and shouted, "Dad." By the time my parents came rushing in, there was no one outside. Just the prints in the snow again. Barefoot. Leading to my window. No trail leading away. I didn't go to school the next day. I told my parents I was sick. That much was true. In a way, my body felt like it hadn't rested in days. My brain was wired, heart racing every time the house made a noise. I tried to rationalize everything. Maybe Evan had a twin. Maybe someone was playing a prank. Maybe I was hallucinating. But the footprints in the snow, the voice at the window, the eyes. No. That wasn't a person. By mid-afternoon, I made up my mind. I needed answers. Real ones. I remembered a conversation from weeks ago, during the first snow, when Evan and I had walked home together. He'd mentioned living past the bridge, near the tree line. That wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes by bike. I told my parents I was going to the library. Instead, I biked to the edge of town, past the rusted iron bridge over the dried-up creek, and into a narrow road that led toward the forest. I found the house easily. It was the only one on the street with boarded windows. It looked abandoned. Dead leaves had piled high on the porch. The mailbox hung open, empty. There were no tire marks, no footsteps. Just silence. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again. The wood echoed too loud in the still air. I reached for the doorknob and turned it. Unlocked. Inside, the house was cold. Dust floated through the dim light. Furniture covered in sheets. No signs of recent life, no food, no smell of people, no sound. Just a low, distant creaking from somewhere deeper inside. And then I saw it. In the living room, on a coffee table, sat a sketchbook. I flipped it open. Every page was filled, hundreds of drawings. All of people. Faces. Most I didn't recognize. Some I did. Teachers. Classmates. My parents. And me. Always me. In one drawing, I was sleeping. Something shadowy crouched at the end of my bed. In another, I was in school, standing alone in the hallway. Behind me, the outline of something tall, featureless, like a figure drawn in charcoal and left unfinished. On the last page, Evan had written something in thin, scratchy letters. I didn't bring it. It brought me. Suddenly, the creaking stopped. I wasn't alone. I turned toward the hallway, heart in my throat. That's when I heard it. Step. 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 Always 3. And then silenced, I ran. Out of the house. Through the brittle weeds and bare trees. I left my bike in the driveway and didn't stop until I reached the bridge again. I don't remember breathing. I don't remember thinking. I just remember running. Like something would catch me if I slowed down. When I finally got home, I locked every door. Closed every curtain. Left every light on. I didn't sleep that night. Or the night after. Evan never came back to school. A few days later, the school counselor came into our class with the principal. Said something vague about a transfer student moving out of state due to family issues. No one asked questions. No one really cared. But I did. I went back once. A week later. With a friend. The house was empty. Cleaner, somehow. The sketchbook was gone. Like none of it ever happened. I started noticing it after that. Small things. The sound of breathing when the house was quiet. Lights flickering, just once, when I walked into a room. My reflection in the mirror pausing half a second too long before copying my movement. I told myself it was trauma. Stress. The way the brain copes with fear. But every time I turned a corner and thought I saw something, just at the edge of my vision, I remembered Evan's words. You saw it. It saw you too. I don't think it ever left. I think he was just the beginning. And me? I'm just next.